afternoon, good evening, maybe good morning for some of you. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and welcome to our last webinar of 2022. Woo! It's been a good year, and I'm glad to go out with IGEL here with us today. So looking forward to that. Let's get started with some housekeeping details. We are recording today's session, and you will get a link to the recording tomorrow. I'll get that out to you via email, so be on the lookout for that. Also, you are free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar. We're going to try to answer as many of your questions as we can today. So just type those in the Q&A panel as you have them. I think we're going to save probably most of them for the end, but do type them in, don't be shy. Also, I want to thank IGEL for being one of our CUGC Women in Tech sponsors. Our Women in Tech program provides one-to-one mentoring and other content and activities and events throughout the year. And we're just really grateful to IGEL for being a part of that. So thank you to IGEL. Always like to call that out. All right, let me introduce our presenter and moderator today. We have Dan O'Farrell. He is the VP of Product Marketing at IGEL. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
And we also have with us Bart Jacobs. He is a CTP. He is going to help us with the question period later. He's going to be keeping an eye on all your questions and making sure they get answered. So hello, Bart. Thanks for being here.
Hello, nice to be here.
All right, so Dan, I'm going to kick things over to you now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you are free.
Okay.
I'll be back a little later.
All right. Let me do that right now. Here we go. Okay. So thanks, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for joining us. As we near the end of the calendar year, right? We've got about 2.5 weeks left, and it'll be 2023. And a lot I'll be talking about today will be taking a look at 2023 and beyond in terms of what's happened over the last couple of years and how that's going to shape computing and accessing critical apps and data and how we do that going forward. The title of this discussion is Return to the Office. And even that is a little bit of a fluid topic, right, in terms of how that's happening, but it's certainly happening right now to various degrees. You know, the Citrix is a critical partner of ours at IGEL. We've been working with Citrix for many years. You know, Citrix is a pioneer in distributed computing, delivery of virtual apps and VDI. We would not be who we are without the work we've done with Citrix. And that work continues, right? You know, and a lot of what we're innovating right now and a lot of what we're looking at is how work has transformed. I'm not gonna lament the last few years in terms of a trip down memory lane, but the fact of the matter is I would submit that most of the people right now in this meeting are working in a vastly different way than they worked 2.5, 3 years ago. Many of us are joining this webcast from home. Some are in an office, some are in a shared workplace. So, you know, while the work styles and the workspaces and the workplaces might have changed, there are a number of ongoing critical requirements that have to be addressed. And in fact, there's some more challenges that come with this more fluid, hybrid, if you will, work style. I think most of us understand that this move toward out of the traditional office that was ignited by the pandemic, but it was actually happening before that. It was already in motion, but it was for a select few people. For example, actually, I'm with IGEL. I joined IGEL about 4 years ago. I was commuting to the office from San Jose to San Francisco, because our US headquarters is in San Francisco. And I told our CEO, who was my boss, Jed Ayers, I said, Jed, I'm moving to Arizona. You know, and what Jed said was, cool, make sure you come visit us in San Francisco, once every 4 to 6 weeks. Visit your team, which happens to be in Germany, once a quarter, and everything's good. So even at that point, we had the tools in place and the capability of working remotely or working hybrid. But then shortly after that, it was not just people like myself, but it was entire engineering and development teams, QA organizations and operations, and everybody kind of had to relocate or kind of alter the way they work. So the way it works now is the workforce is absolutely hybrid, right? Now, some companies have said that they want people in the office every day, and that's fine, right? I mean, it's up to each individual organization to figure out what works best for them. A lot of companies, and if you look at any of the job boards, one of the first things you'll see in the job description it'll say remote. That's actually a selling point now. And then a lot of organizations, and this includes IGEL, and maybe where you guys work, it's a more fluid kind of hybrid model, which is, look, work from, work remotely from home, if you're traveling, obviously from anywhere. But please do come into the office, convene with your colleagues, mix with your coworkers, some of the week, or maybe a few days of the week, or when you can. And that seems to now have become the primary model. And that's the model that companies like Citrix and IGEL are developing our technology for. And actually, this touches HR. And in fact, HR now, the human resources organizations, have a lot more clout when it comes to how IT delivers its services, right? So, Gartner did a study on this. 75% of the hybrid or remote workers say they expect to work this way. We now have technology advances from companies like Citrix and IGEL to enable this. And then the device has actually also become more important. It's almost kind of ironic. The endpoint device, typically you join a company and they say, here's your asset tag device. This is what you will use. But what's happening now is a lot of people are joining companies and they want a device that fits their work style and lifestyle. One crude analogy that I've made in some of our past Disrupt events is it's almost like equipping a baseball team with the right mitt, right? Like the catcher's mitt is this big round mitt, and the first baseman's mitt is really extra long to dig the ball out of the dirt. Your infielders have smaller mitts so they can turn double plays, and your outfielders have larger mitts so they can, leap up and steal home runs and all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is one size does not fit all in terms of how people work, or even in terms of the endpoint device they use. So that's one of the reasons, for example, our IGEL OS software will run on any compatible x86 64 device, because we know that companies want to furnish their people with the right device to get their job done. And because of that, right, and because of the demand of the hybrid worker, their user experience matters more than ever, right? Because over the last year and a half, 2 years, they had what they called the Great Resignation. If this young lady that we're looking at here stays in this mode, she's probably going to leave your company, right? You've got to make sure you're delivering a user experience that allows people to be productive and to work in a manner where they feel good about their job and what they're accomplishing. The other thing that is changing right now as we speak is the mix of applications and how people access them. Now, certainly in the enterprise, Microsoft, in terms of the apps that we access, continues to dominate. However, the way those apps are accessed when you use technology from the likes of Citrix and IGEL is now changing. So in this analysis, the dark blue area is the traditional Microsoft apps: Word, PowerPoint, Excel, SharePoint, etc. The stuff that many of us use. I use certainly every day. But the top right, the light gray area on this graph, are those apps that are now entirely cloud delivered. And in fact, one could argue that you don't even need something like a full-blown Windows operating system running underneath in order to access and do your job on those applications. Now that dark blue area, that tail is going to go on for a long time. In other words, people are going to continue to access Windows apps for probably decades more. But that tail will probably get thinner and thinner as more and more applications, including Windows, through the likes of Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 Cloud PC, morph into this cloud dominant model. Our goal at IGEL is to make sure that we accommodate any mechanism by which you access your target applications. We don't care. We want to make sure that our operating system working with Citrix makes it super easy to do that no matter how you're doing it. The other thing that has really advanced over the last few years, and today we're using Zoom on this call, is the acceptance and use of unified communications. It was critical when the pandemic started because everybody went home. It was, these apps were in high usage, however, before that, right? I mean, people were using WebEx like crazy and Zoom, and then Teams became very popular. But the emphasis on those apps and to make sure they deliver a great user experience was accelerated during the pandemic because so many people were widely distributed. That's why it's really important for companies like Citrix and IGEL to make sure we're offering compatibility with the latest version of Teams, the latest version of Zoom, and in IGEL's case, the latest version of the Citrix Workspace app, which happens to be the November 22 version, which was like last month. We stay on top of that. So this is really important as well to deliver that user experience. The other thing that has actually become even more challenging because of a widely distributed workforce is security. And every IT organization's nightmare and every CSO's nightmare is ransomware or some other form of malware. And there have been plenty of headlines here. This is what keeps people up at night. This is what puts people in a real dilemma if they do get hit. And our goal is to do our part along with Citrix to make sure that at least from the endpoint perspective, they don't have to worry. So, we submit that we can help turn your endpoint into a non-target. Now, obviously, IGEL does not protect what's happening in the data center or cloud, where you still need to have all your anti-malware, your bit anomaly detection software running and all that kind of stuff. But at least for the hundreds or thousands of tens of thousands of endpoint devices, we believe we can essentially turn them into non-targets, take them out of the equation, which to an IT organization is a huge relief, right? So managing this hybrid workforce, right? The other thing that gets impacted is the help desk, because the implication here is if you've got more and more remote users, there's going to be more and more kind of weird exotic problems that come out of that, right? So this is another analysis in terms of the percentage of staff necessary to handle all these help desk calls. At IGEL, we think we can contribute immensely toward reducing this workload, reducing the number of trouble tickets by simplifying the mechanism by which people access their applications using technology from the likes of Citrix. And then the one other consideration that has emerged right over the last years and months is that of carbon footprint. We as a company, right, take it seriously. We think it's important as a global member of the community to do our parts to decrease what's being thrown into landfills, to reduce the amount of energy that we consume and that our customers consume. So one good example, right? If you replace Windows on an endpoint device accessing virtual apps or desktops or SaaS-based applications, you can essentially extend the life of that device by up to about 3 or 4 years or longer. The reason being that IGEL OS is so less demanding on the CPU and the RAM that device actually becomes a much more powerful device because it's using much less overhead to run the operating system. That frees up resources to access your applications, and it essentially breathes new life. It's like the fountain of youth for your endpoints. So instead of, doing the hardware refresh every 3 or 4 years and sending those devices into a landfill, you can extend the life of your endpoint devices with IGEL OS. And by the way, why not use a thin client or a low power device that still has plenty of horsepower to access your virtual apps and desktops, because IGEL OS is the perfect fit for those types of devices. And now you're consuming less energy at the same time. So right now, we believe IGEL OS is the perfect pairing, if you will, with Citrix, specifically in most cases, the workspace app. But even if you're using like the Citrix secure browser to access pure SaaS-based applications, it still makes great sense because it's a super efficient, secure operating system running underneath a super efficient and secure browser. So in either case, whether it's full SaaS browser-based or VDI or virtual apps, IGEL OS is like a perfect complementary operating system to work with your Citrix environment. But going forward, right? I mean, this is the model. We'll attach to any of the popular, cloud-based mechanisms and brokers to deliver a virtual app or desktop to your endpoint device. This is the traditional model, right? You got your apps and desktops, you've got your endpoint devices, and on those devices, you've got IGEL OS running on them, right? So it's classic VDI and DAS. And this really did come to the rescue when the pandemic hit, because people wanted to still manage and control their apps and data while allowing people to go home or elsewhere. The market has been growing steadily. Now, this is not one of those big violent hockey sticks going north, but more and more use cases and applications are moving toward VDI and DAS. And there's multiple reasons behind that. Number one is obviously in markets where you've got mandates for security and privacy, regulated markets like healthcare and finance and government and retail, it's a natural fit because it gives the IT team the control they need while allowing people to do their jobs, and in some cases, nothing more, right? That's what you get with the great control. But going forward, we're seeing more use cases kind of flipping over this model as companies have discovered that they can allow their people to work and distribute it while still managing that widely distributed workforce in an extremely effective way. So still growing, still plenty of opportunity, either in new markets or more users in existing markets. And one of the reasons people are doing this is, they want to be able to get their, unified communications to work while still managing and controlling it, right? They're getting tired of all the updates and patches that you have with traditional computing, fat clients. They're tired of refreshing the device every 3 or 4 years as Windows gets fatter and Intel and AMD have to make more powerful chips. They're worried about security. So if there's a model that's more secure than the traditional fat client, they love that idea. And again, the bottom right, this is kind of like has been a traditional pain in the butt, is the constant patching and updating. And imagine having to update Windows 10.x or Windows 11 on thousands or tens of thousands of devices. It's a huge mundane burden on the IT team, where their time could be better spent doing other things. With IGEL OS on those endpoint devices, patching and updating is a breeze. It's nothing more than a background task that your end users almost never even notice. So if you think about it traditionally, right, we believe IGEL OS is perfect right now for VDI, DAS, and accessing software as a service because it is able to deliver a great experience like with Zoom and et cetera. Super easy to manage. That's kind of like the hallmark of the operating system. Very, very secure because of the tiny attack surface. And the fact that even if it does ever get hit, it hasn't so far, There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's nothing on the device. It's a read-only operating system. It's modular. It's got what we call a chain of trust. There's really no payoff. And then finally, because it's so lean, it's very sustainable. So the model kind of changes a little bit, right? Because our goal is to make sure that it's an OS that's built for VDI, DAS, and SaaS, anything from the cloud, working with Citrix. Because of this widely distributed workforce, these end user computing solutions have helped when companies had to move, companies had to, during the pandemic, allowed retail to keep running, allowed operations to keep working when they weren't always able to do it. We have a product called the UD Pocket that can basically turn any PC instantly into your endpoint workspace to Citrix just by popping it into a USB port and then booting from USB. That helped a lot of companies in the area of disaster recovery and business continuity. So we've got our traditional, Citrix and other types of technology to deliver virtual apps and desktops. But what we're seeing growing immensely is the use of SaaS-based applications that don't necessarily even require a broker. There's no VDI necessary. You really don't even have to have Windows on an endpoint to get to these. And a lot of organizations, if you look at that software on the top right, they're running a big part of their business on this software. These are Fortune 500 companies that are using Salesforce. They're using ServiceNow. They're using Workday. Even healthcare organizations now, there's a cloud-based version of Epic. So more and more is moving to the cloud natively. And what we're working on right now with IGEL and what we'll be introducing early next year is a version of our IGEL OS that is perfect for this model. Still great with the top left for VDI and DAS, but also ideal for accessing your cloud-based SaaS applications at the same time, because that mix will vary from company to company. So having said that, we've already looked at this graph. Our goal working with Citrix is to make sure that you've got this perfect bridge from the traditional Windows, either via FAT clients with everything running locally, or a Windows FAT client accessing through the Workspace app, your virtual apps and desktops, to the top gray area where you really don't need Windows at all. And by the way, Microsoft is totally on board with this because, Microsoft doesn't really care how you access Windows. In fact, we're working very closely with Microsoft. There'll be keynote speakers at our upcoming Disrupt event. So, because to Microsoft, they're still selling their Windows licenses, and they're bullish on accessing Windows through our Linux-based, very lightweight OS on the endpoint. So why IGEL for this, right? Well, the world actually really does need an alternative to a FAT client on the endpoint. The fact that it's Linux-based is actually a very good thing because there's an army of developers out there who can continue to refine and improve the operating system. And we think we've got the creme de la creme of those people working for us right now to make sure it stays in lockstep with how the model of computing continues to evolve. And for example, stays in lockstep with Citrix. As I mentioned, we're already supporting the November 22 version of the Workspace app. So our goal is to make sure that you can access any of these workspaces, if you will, any of these workloads, no matter what the origin and no matter how they're delivered to the end user with IGEL OS running on those endpoint devices. The management, by the way, which is famous for its ease of use, also includes a REST API. So if you've got something like Intune, or you've got something like any other third-party platform for either managing or collecting data, we can talk directly to it. Now, to make sure that we continue to do a great job here, we'll be announcing what we're currently calling OS 12. It's the next version. The current version of IGEL OS, which is our software on the endpoint, is called OS 11. We're currently calling the next version, which is pretty revolutionary, OS 12. It may be called something different, by the way, when we announce it. But this is a little bit of a sneak preview of what to expect and why we're doing it. And it's all about the belief that most apps over time, and we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, will end up being cloud delivered. We believe maybe in 10 or 15 years, people will be sitting around having a beer, and one person will say to the next, remember when companies actually built data centers? Remember when companies paid for the real estate and the heating and the cooling and all those racks of equipment, and then they had to hire a staff to maintain all that? Remember when that used to happen? We think the model of a cloud-based delivered service of an application or workloads in that form over time will start to dominate. We want to make sure that that experience will be good as good as the experience we're delivering with Citrix today. And it's all about evolution. I'm not gonna go into nauseating detail. I think you can get a good feel just from scanning left to right. Actually, at the far left, before all this, was just server-based computing with IBM mainframes and front-end processors, people on terminals. Then HP and DEC came around with their mini computers that were distributed. And then we had VDI, and Citrix was a pioneer here with XenApp and Zen Desktop to deliver your apps and desktops virtually. So now you were freed up, from having to be connected to any specific machine. And then migration to the cloud in terms of taking on this model and offering it as a service in the terms and moving it to VDI and DaaS. And on the far right, what we see now is why not just take the app? For example, in healthcare, the only thing that matters to the clinician is the application, They swipe in, they swipe out, their app comes up. And they don't care what's running underneath it. It could be anything. And more that model is going to continue to dominate as we move forward. So because of that, we're revamping our technology to make sure it puts you in the perfect spot to take full advantage of that evolution. And we're doing it based on 4 key kind of tenets here. The first one is we want to make sure the management is super easy, because that's what IGEL is already known for with their universal management suite. It's super easy to manage hundreds of thousands, if you have them, endpoints from a single console. Security obviously stays top of mind, We want to do our part. And by the way, the security challenge is a multi-pronged effort, But our part to make that endpoint a non-interesting, it's a lousy thing to have to target if you're a hacker, to go after the endpoint if it's running IGEL OS. You're essentially going to waste your time. And if you're ever lucky enough to hit it, there's no reward. We want to make sure that this person, this call center agent, has a great user experience, or your developers, or whoever, or your clinician who's actually, there are hospitals now who are offering clinical services outside the hospital. One of our customers is offering clinical service to the homeless, where they actually set up spot clinics, So it's not necessarily all inside the hospital anymore. No matter how people are working, we want to make sure that they're happy and productive. And by the way, if they're not, they're going to leave. And then finally, we want to make sure we can help our customers do their part to contribute to the sustainability challenge. So if you think about it, we want to make these people much happier, even happier than they are right now using Citrix and IGEL. We want to make sure that the IT organization is even more lean and efficient. They can actually work more strategically because they're spending much less time on the stupid mundane tasks of patches and updates, for example. And securing the endpoints should become super easy for them, And not a nightmare. We want to make sure that that end user in the middle continues to be your end user and doesn't leave to go work someplace else. And then we want it to benefit the organization through things like a much smaller carbon footprint, save lots of money. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is when you move to this model of computing, you can save millions of dollars over a multi-year span if you're a larger organization, just on the cost of hardware on the cost of operating and on the cost of energy consumption. So what's going to be new? The most important thing that we're going to be doing next year with our software, and we're looking at, by the way, the April timeframe, is we're separating the operating system software from the applications and services. So right now, for example, with IGEL OS 11, it supports the Workspace app, the 1122 Workspace app from Citrix, and that's great. But it also supports a lot of other stuff, and it's monolithic in that you have to have 1108.x, whatever it is, to get these latest features, which is the latest version. Why not just separate the OS from the apps and services? We build what we call an app portal, and our partners like Citrix just simply drop in the latest version of their software into the app portal, and then the end user can access that when it's convenient for them, or not, based on how IT sets up that end user, right? So this now all of a sudden gives your end users great control over their app mix, if you allow it, based on their job role. And at the same time, it frees up the IT organization to not have to keep delivering these massive software releases that require all kinds of QA process for every little wrinkle added into it. Because we have over 120 technology partners. You know, obviously we got the Citrixes and those guys and Microsoft, but peripherals, card readers, printer software. So, by separating the apps from the operating system and the services, it allows our customers to be much more nimble, to move much faster when they want to add a new capability. And it frees up our QA organization and our development organization to continue to innovate without being bogged down by a giant chunk of software, which, by the way, is not that big a chunk of software compared to Windows. It's modular. This is the separation of the software from the apps and cloud-based services. We envision a single sign-on where someone signs on once and they're running all day long, no matter what they do. So think of those SaaS apps, think of the VDI, think of the virtual apps. Doesn't matter, they sign on once, that's it. We'll support even more software. Our IGEL OS software with Citrix will run on any compatible x86 64 device, and we keep adding more vendors to that list because they do go through a validation process with us, because we want to make sure we can support that claim with them. And then we also are moving to an entirely subscription-based licensing model. The current version of IGEL OS, you can purchase a perpetual part of the software, and then the rest of the software on the management side is a subscription. OS 12 will be all subscription. And by the way, if you're a current IGEL customer, the migration to that model will be seamless and will not cost anyone anything to make that migration. Obviously, that's how we treat our customers. So let's talk about this a little bit. The benefits of doing this is, think of onboarding, right? When you break the software away from the apps and services, you can enable a very simplified onboarding process. You've just hired a new person in your company. You want to give them a great first impression. You send them their device, which, by the way, is modeled after their job role. When they power that thing up the first time, you want to make sure that it's a seamless, easy process. And I'll show you a short 2-minute demo of how that works. Pretty cool. Smart deployment of apps by breaking the apps from the OS. We have an app portal that looks a lot like what we access from our smartphones. I'll talk about that. But it now makes it much easier now for our partners like Citrix and others to simply drop in their validated version of their latest software, and it becomes available to those users you deem appropriate for that software. So that's really cool. And then finally, greater visibility of what's happening on all those endpoints that are running IGEL OS. The management, IGEL has a great reputation. The UMS, we call it, is super easy to use, very intuitive. This will be fully web-based, but we intend to stay the leader in this area in terms of managing IGEL OS-powered devices. And again, that platform has a REST API if you want to integrate it into some other existing management platform within your organization. Even easier to use, even more powerful, even more scalable than the current version, which is already best in class. So the other thing that I mentioned, we separated the services, and these are all cloud-based services that kind of makes the magic happen, right? So one of those services I already mentioned, which is the app portal. We also have a cloud-based insight service to give you that greater insight into the endpoints. We have the onboarding service, and these are all sitting inside the secure IGEL cloud. Think of it this way: if you're an IGEL using IGEL software, you get your own custom customer portal into these services. So obviously you only see your set of services, you manage your set of services for your end users, but it's all residing within the secure IGEL cloud. Now, if you're a government organization in Europe, if you're an organization that wants to have this on-prem, that's possible as well. But we envision that 95% of this will be run out of our cloud, our secure cloud. And then even licensing and support tickets, trouble tickets, et cetera, will be run as a service inside the secure cloud. The app portal, just to give you a sneak peek into this, it's going to look very, very similar. If you've got an iPhone and you want to download an app onto your iPhone, you've got an Android device, you want to go to the Play Store or the Android's Play Store to download an app onto your smartphone, it's going to look almost exactly like that. Two reasons we're doing this. Since we separated the apps from the OS, we wanted to make the accessing those apps very simple. And if you think of everybody coming into the workforce, they've grown up with this model already. So your university graduates, they want this, they expect this. This is how their mind works. So it's a great way to attract young talent. You're showing them something that they're already used to, and it's a very easy process to bring them into your organization. It'll include the IGEL specific apps, as well as our IGEL ready partners like Citrix, and I'll think of like Printer Logic, Control Up, Improvada. Just think of the typical companies that are providing technology to this ecosystem. You'll be able to download the latest version of their apps. And if you want to say, hey, for this particular user or for their job role, we want to allow them access to either the latest version or what we call the N-1 version. So for the Workspace app, for example, you might allow them to download the November version or maybe the June version based on what nuances they're running into within their environments, right, in their jobs. And again, this would be 95% cloud-based, but an on-premises version will be available. The Insight service, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the fact of the matter is nobody knows our software better than we do. So if IGEL OS is running on an endpoint device, you can allow your IT team to get extremely detailed information on what's happening there. Who's using the device, what the duration was, what they did on the device. Now, some customers are a little bit concerned about the big brother, I'm doing air quotes here, aspect of this, but this is optional. So this can be turned on with the dial set to high or completely turned off. So based on your organization, the type of business you're in, what you're comfortable doing in terms of your end users, you can either get great insight or none at all, or a mix based on your user community. Completely up to you, to your IT and maybe your HR organization, right? And then finally, we have the onboarding service. And this again is to bring people up and running and getting them up to speed immediately with zero IT involvement at the time that they come up. Nobody's on the phone. There's no, you're not handing over the desktop to this person to walk you through it. And I'm going to show you how this works. You basically answer 3 easy questions and you're up and running. So imagine you just hired somebody. Okay, so you just hired Mary in Toledo, Ohio, and you, as a company, She went through the interview process. Everybody loves her. She's so excited about working for your company. You send her the device. Maybe it's a laptop, right? Maybe Mary's a mobile person who's going to be working from home at the office and elsewhere. It's asset tagged to your company. She takes the device out of the box, the shipping carton, plugs it in, and you've given her two pieces of information. You have given her an email address, and you have given her a default password that she's going to log in the first time. So here's what happens. Mary has just unboxed the device. She plugged it in, and she's going to power the device on for the very first time. This is the first thing she sees. It's an initial IGEL OS splash screen, right? That's the operating system that's running on there. And by default, since it's coming up for the first time, it's going to welcome the new user, and it's going to ask a few questions. The user has the liberty to pick their language. We actually developed this demo in Sweden. There's going to be a default time set that they can default to. They'll put in their email address that you gave them. Mary has her email address. In this case, it was somebody named Bratsvig. They put that email address, and based on that email address, there is a domain. And based on that domain, this device in IGEL now in the IGEL cloud knows what company it is. So now they put in, we've got their email address, we've got their password, we know who this customer is, we know the company, they have their own private cloud inside IGEL's cloud, and we can now log them in. As this happens now, we're mapping this end user to the policies and permissions that have been set for them within the company based on their job role. And this can be mapped back to AD, Microsoft Active Directory, if you wish. So we're doing some housekeeping here. We're gonna, map, we know what that Mary now works. Maybe she works in sales or marketing or something. Now she's gonna get an initial screen that is mapped to her job role. And her job, by the way, what you're offering her is an AVD interface. So she has permission to access Azure Virtual Desktop, and we've given her a browser. That's what she sees. So now in her AVD, in her environment, we're doing some final housekeeping and setting it up for her. So she's now up and running. She can click on AVD, and what's happening right here, this stuff is going in automatically based on single sign-on that was already set up for her at the beginning. So it's logging her into her AVD session because she clicked on it, and up will come her AVD desktop delivered through Citrix, through the Citrix Workspace app. Now she's up and running. She has her AVD desktop. She can do a few things, including running a browser. We have given her permission through her browser to actually be a UMS operator. And the only reason we did that is that we can prove that this device is now under management. So as a UMS operator, probably not the very first time she is a UMS operator, but we're showing that you can go into the UMS through a browser and we can find that device. It's up and running. At no time during this 2 minutes was she on the phone with IT. At no time was she in a chat window with anyone. At no time did someone have to take over her desktop to get her up and running. And now she's fully up and running. And every subsequent time she logs in, it's instantaneous. It's like anybody logging into their desktop single sign-on the first time of the day. So I'm wrapping up here. With OS 12, we've got those people we're looking to make happy. It's providing, these services at the top left, which are enabling all this great stuff to happen. We've separated the OS from the apps. We're accessing, as we always have, the traditional VDI and DAS with our traditional technology partners, including, of course, Citrix. We've now added to the mix optimized access, secure optimized access to all these pure software in the cloud-based services. You may wish to do that with the Citrix Secure Browser, which adds an extra layer of security and simplicity and management to this. You're accessing and managing all those endpoints through the UMS software, which, by the way, has a REST API to multiple third-party platforms if you're already using those. And the end result is we believe that the life becomes much easier for the IT organization. Much less time spent on doing the stupid plumbing tasks that are typically associated with managing a network and a large enterprise of distributed endpoint devices. Your endpoint users are running Zoom and unified communications and Teams seamlessly. They're getting great video. They're using the latest technologies. It's up to date with all the latest releases. And based on that end user, they're getting the apps they need when they need them and support for the latest version. And by the way, throughout all this, even though that end user is very happy, in no circumstance does the IT organization ever lose any of the control, which was one of the main reasons VDI existed in the first place. So for example, if that end user is a call center agent and you want them running one application all the time, they may never see the app portal, because you might say, you know what, for these people, I'm just going to push out their software because I want to have that much control. So it's the best for both worlds. The people you want to give the freedom to, they get it. Device of choice, location of choice, work style of choice, and IT has all the control that they need to make sure that the enterprise is secure and everyone's equipped with the right technology. So we believe right now, we think we have the right OS for this next wave of computing. Our goal is to stay in that position as the #1 endpoint OS for accessing VDI, DAS, SAS. And we don't know, by the way, how this is going to evolve over time. I don't know what this is going to look like in 8 years, but by separating the OS from the apps and services, we now have the ability to adapt and evolve and move with the technology as it does, and to make sure our customers can always take advantage of the latest technological advances. So that's looking beyond this year, right? That's what we see happening. You'll hear more from us in the March, April timeframe on this, but it's very exciting. And obviously, Citrix will be with us, in this journey. Our goal is to become the next operating system option for anyone who's looking to access VDI, DAS, and cloud-based software workloads and workspaces. I'm going to finish with this. We have a big event coming up. It's in Munich. It's February 14th to 16th. It's called Disrupt 23. That's what we call our big events, Disrupt. The last year, it was a regional event. This year, we're going back to the big central event. We're going to have one in Munich for Europe, and in April, we'll have the same thing in the US in Nashville. So if you are interested, this will include Citrix as a top level sponsor for this. Citrix will be there. They'll be there with us, along with a lot of other big names in end user computing. It's a 2-day event, 2.5-day event, actually. It's a great time. It's at a great venue in Munich. If you have any interest whatsoever, please go to disrupteuc.com. You can register. If you register now, you'll save a lot of money. And everybody, it's like a who's who. We'll have Mark Templeton there as one of our keynote speakers. We'll have Tarkan Maynor there, current Chief Commercial Officer at Nutanix, former CEO at Wise. People from Microsoft, people from all walks of life, technical boot camps. So if you're on the engineering side and you want to go, you can sell it to your boss. You can get certified in IGEL OS or in Citrix. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time, and I will happily hand it back over to Stephanie. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I know we have some questions though, and we have a little time to get to those. So yeah, Bart, if you want to tackle those.
Yeah, I think the question is on a lot of people's minds. If you're a current OS 11 customer, do you automatically get all the new features with OS 12, or will there be a fee to pay?
Yeah, so if you're a current OS 11 customer and you migrate to OS 12, in the very first version of OS 12, you might want to actually stay on OS 11 a little bit longer, because OS 12, when it comes out, and this is not unusual, right? will not be a complete superset of the OS 11 features. And the one area where it won't be is the area of the IGEL ready integrations. One of the great things about IGEL is we have 120 plus technology partners, including Citrix. That's the good news. When you move from OS 11 to OS 12, we are recertifying, re-evaluating and validating all those technologies with OS 12. That process is going on right now, by the way. So obviously Citrix will be validated, but some of these like more exotic interfaces and protocols or third-party peripherals may or may not be. So for those who want to migrate from OS 11 to OS 12, we'll do an evaluation of your environment so that we can make sure that you've got all the features in OS 12 that you already have on OS 11. So that's a good question. So for some customers, the really big guys on OS 11 who have lots of wide variety of peripherals, we might suggest that they stay on OS 11 a little bit longer until OS 12 has all of those validated IGEL ready integrations.
Okay. A couple of questions that come to the same thing. Is there an option to dual boot IGEL OS and Windows OS or Mac OS?
Dual boot. So when you have IGEL OS running on a device, that's the only thing running on that device, right? Now, we have a product called the UD Pocket, which allows you from a USB port to boot up IGEL OS. But at no time does IGEL OS and the other operating system coexist to the end user. And that's a huge security exposure. That's why that's how it works. When you pull the UD Pocket out of that USB port, the device goes back to its original operating system. So there's no dual boot capability. It's either one or the other. And if you've loaded IGEL OS onto the device permanently, all that device does is IGEL OS. If you want to be able to revert back to the previous operating system, whether it be Windows or some other version of a Linux-based operating system, you would use the UD Pocket.
Okay, and then one final question is: in the new setup then, can it be configured in the kiosk scenario where you have a device on the kiosk and users log on and log off all the time? Yeah,
and that's a current capability we have in IGEL OS right now called the shared workplace capability, or a kiosk where different users can use the same device. You can lock a device down where it only conveys one single application, right? Think of it as an appliance mode or a kiosk mode. That's capable with IGEL OS right now. And think of a call center where you have different call center agents coming in and using the same device. We can actually set up IGEL OS so that if one user logs off a device and the next user logs on, their environment can be mapped to that particular user. Maybe they're left-handed and you want to change the buttons on the mouse, or they've got preferences for how they view their screen desktop. We can map user preferences based on end users, even though different people are sharing a single device. So that's in OS 11 now. It'll be in OS 12 as well.
Okay, who can people contact if they want to evaluate the solution themselves?
Yeah, we have people evaluating it right now, and I think we've topped out because we want to make sure that the evaluation, we actually close the evaluation period, but we are getting into what we call now a pilot phase, and we may have availability for more pilots. Think of it as like a first beta. It's essentially in beta right now. It's going into some pretty big environments. We can consider somebody if they want to get into that. I think the best way to do it is to just send me an email request, or and my email is real simple. It's O'Farrell, OFARRELL @igel.com. So it's my last name without the apostrophe @igel.com, and then I can hook you up with with the team that's managing. Yep, that's it. Thank you, Stephanie. So yeah, feel free. I'm happy to take your email personally, and I can forward it on to the right people. See if we can fit you in.
And then the final question, I think the units themselves, are they FIPS compliant?
Well, we don't sell hardware anymore. So FIPS typically would be hardware. We have a few thin client devices we're emptying out of our inventory. We're a purely software company. So I think FIPS is more of a hardware type thing. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But to answer your question, it's not fully FIPS compliant. But again, our software can run on any hardened type of hardware environment. So I hope that helps. You know, real quickly, IGEL used to be known for selling thin clients. We only sell those devices for people who want to empty out our inventory. We are not building any more thin client devices. We are selling our software, and you can order it as an option on HP and Lenovo and LG endpoint devices right now. So our strategy is not to build hardware. Our strategy is to work with our key partners like HP and Lenovo and LG and others to enable their customers to order IGEL OS on the device straight from the factory.
Okay, I think that wraps up the questions for today.
Great.
All right. I just have one last slide. Just pull that up. There we go. Okay, so nope, it moved on me. There we are. All right, thank you so much. Like again, I want to just thank IGEL for being a global sponsor of CUGC and also a sponsor of our Women in Tech group. That's been great support over the years. Also want to thank Dan and Bart for being with us today. Appreciate you being on our last webinar of 2022. And finally, I know some of you might have opted in for a chance to win some IGEL swag. So I have 10 IGEL sling bags to give away, and I will draw the winners after the webinar is over, and I'll send you an email if you are one of those winners. Otherwise, you can look out on Twitter to see who won. And I think that wraps everything up. I do want to say, I put in the chat, but CUGC will be at both of those Disrupt events. So we're excited to participate this year and hope that if you are at either one, you'll definitely stop by and say hello. Hope to see you there.
Yep.
And
And Stephanie, really quick, because I see one last question I want to answer. Somebody's asking if IGEL ever offering a completely cloud-hosted version of the UMS. That's longer term plan, not initially, not with IGEL OS 12. You could stick the UMS in the cloud, but it's not a fully cloud-based service initially. We want to get there, but probably not during 2023. Just want to make sure I answer that question. Thanks.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Oh, sorry, was somebody else about to say something? No, okay. All right, so I hope you all enjoy the end of the year. Happy holidays to you all, and a happy new year, and I hope we'll see you at another CUGC event again in 2023. I know our virtual Excel is happening on February 9th. Some promotion on that just started going out, so that's our virtual Excel event. Everybody can attend, and hope to see you there. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, Dan and Bart. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.